An accident left me blind and helpless, so my fiancé and sister betrayed me, had an affair, and tried to steal my $800,000 settlement. I'm in a situation that feels completely impossible to deal with. Just a year ago, at 26, I had my life in order. I was independent, working, handling everything on my own. Now, I can't even get through the day without relying on someone else for the simplest tasks. Being blind means I have no choice but to trust what people tell me, but that trust doesn't come easy. I keep second-guessing everyone's intentions. My parents say one thing, my fiancé says another, and my gut is pulling me in a completely different direction. The hardest part is that I have no way to confirm anything for myself. I need to figure out who's really looking out for me and who might be taking advantage of my situation. A few days ago, my cousin Tessa told me something that could shatter everything I thought I knew. If she's right, my entire relationship is built on a lie. Tessa has been my primary caregiver since the accident 6 months ago. She's the one who helps me get dressed, makes sure I eat, and takes care of all the little things I can't manage on my own anymore. Out of everyone, she's been the most present. The accident that took my sight was brutal. I was on my way home from work when a delivery truck ran a red light and plowed into my car. The impact was devastating. I ended up in the hospital, where I spent 3 long months undergoing test after test. At first, my vision was just blurry, but week by week, it deteriorated until one morning, I woke up, and everything was gone. Darkness. Just like that, my world changed. My family visited often, but Tessa was the only one who showed up every single day. She was there, making sure I had what I needed, helping me adjust to this new reality. Losing my sight has changed everything about who I am. Before, I had a great job, my own place, and a wedding to plan. Now, I can't even walk through my own home without bumping into furniture. But even with all that, the thing that terrifies me the most isn't the blindness itself, it's the possibility of losing Trevor, my fiancé. Trevor and I have been together since college. He's always had his struggles, but I believed in him. Throughout his 20s, he had a hard time holding on to jobs. He'd get bored or clash with his bosses and end up quitting after just a few months. His parents only made it worse, constantly bailing him out and paying his bills instead of letting him learn responsibility. I refused to commit to him until he proved he could stand on his own. Eventually, he did. He landed a stable job at an insurance company, stuck with it for over a year, and for the first time, I felt like he was really growing up. His mother wasn't happy about it. She wanted him to take over their struggling family convenience store, but Trevor was determined to prove he could make it on his own. I admired that about him. My parents, however, weren't convinced, especially my dad. He never thought Trevor was good enough for me. He had other ideas, even tried pushing me toward his business partner's son. When my diagnosis became permanent, I tried to break things off with Trevor. I figured he wouldn't want to be tied to a blind wife, especially after he had finally started getting his life together. But he wouldn't let me go. He insisted that he'd spent years working to be a better man for me, and he wasn't about to walk away now. What I didn't know at the time was that my dad had offered Trevor money to leave me. I only found out later my mom let it slip. And to everyone's surprise, Trevor turned him down. Considering how much financial security had always driven him, that was unexpected. My time in the hospital was miserable. I felt trapped, hopeless. I spent weeks drowning in self-pity, convinced my life was over. I couldn't even distract myself with a phone or TV. The only thing that got me through was Trevor. He came every day, bringing audiobooks, telling me stories about work, helping me learn to use my other senses. The nurses kept saying how lucky I was to have such a devoted fiancé. But my mom wasn't convinced. She noticed something I didn't. Trevor only came when other people were around. He never visited early in the morning or late at night when I was really struggling. After 3 months in the hospital, my parents wanted me to move to their home in Vermont. They have a big house with a guest cottage where I could stay, and they figured it would be the best place for me to recover. But Trevor shot that idea down immediately. He argued that I needed to stay in a familiar environment. Eventually, a compromise was made. Tessa moved in with us. She's my mom's sister's daughter and has been a professional caregiver for 10 years. At first, everything worked well. Tessa took care of my medical needs, Trevor went to work, and I focused on learning how to function as a blind person. I even started working with a specialist to learn how to use a computer again. My younger sister, Paige, handled the wedding planning. She's 2 years younger than me and has always been the social one. While I spent my 20s focused on my career, she was the type to make friends everywhere she went. Having her around made things feel a little more normal. The wedding planning gave me something to focus on besides my disability. Tessa, on the other hand, mostly kept her distance during those moments. She's always been incredibly professional, probably because she's been doing this work since she was 18. She had to learn early, her mother got sick when she was young, and taking care of people became second nature to her. Unlike Paige, who loves to gossip, Tessa is quiet. She only speaks when she has something important to say. That's why it shocked me when, one morning, while helping me get dressed, she told me she needed to talk. That wasn't like her. Usually, our conversations stayed focused on my care. She started by explaining that, after working with so many families over the years, she developed a sense for spotting relationship problems. Last year, she even helped one of her elderly clients uncover the fact that his son was stealing money from him. She hesitated, but eventually, she said she couldn't keep quiet, not when it involved me, not when we were family. At first, she kept circling around the point, like she was trying to find the right way to say it. Finally, I told her to just spit it out. And then she did. She told me she believed Trevor and Paige were having an affair. I made her repeat it, twice. Because it didn't make sense. My sister? My fiancé? The same man who turned down money to stay with me after the accident? How could that be possible? When I demanded proof, Tessa admitted she didn't have anything concrete. What she had were observations, little things. The way they lingered too long when passing each other in the hallway. How Trevor would put his hand on Paige's lower back when helping her reach something in the kitchen. And the worst part? They were doing it right in front of me, probably assuming that because I was blind, I wouldn't notice. Then she told me about the late-night whispers. The laughter drifting from another room when they thought everyone else was asleep. I didn't want to believe it. I still don't. But now, I can't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, Tessa is right. And if she is, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do next. Tessa brought up something else, something I hadn't thought much about at the time. Last week, Trevor and Paige disappeared for 2 hours. They told me they were out picking up wedding supplies, and I didn't question it. But now, after everything Tessa has said, it's been gnawing at me. I wanted to dismiss her accusations completely. I wanted to laugh it off and tell her she was imagining things. Trevor isn't perfect, he's awful with money, still plays video games like he's 16, and his car is so messy it could probably qualify as a biohazard, but cheating on me? With Paige? That's beyond anything I can wrap my head around. This is the same man who spent 3 years saving up for my engagement ring when he could have just asked his parents for the money. The same man who sat through every single one of my doctor's appointments, holding my hand when the news kept getting worse. And Paige? She's my sister. My best friend. We grew up sharing everything, clothes, secrets, even crushes. The idea of her betraying me like this doesn't just seem unlikely, it seems impossible. But now, I can't stop dissecting every moment between them over the past few years. They first started getting close at my parents' 25th anniversary party, when Trevor helped Paige with her catering business. After that, they started grabbing lunch together whenever he was working near her office. I thought it was nice that they got along. I actually liked that they had a friendship outside of me. Now, I'm looking back and wondering if I was blind in more ways than one. Like the night of my engagement party when Trevor insisted on driving Paige home because she was too drunk to drive herself. It should have taken 30 minutes. They were gone for 3 hours. Or how Paige suddenly started showing up at my house most mornings, claiming she just wanted to help me get ready for the day. Maybe Tessa is wrong. Maybe she's just misinterpreting things. She's only known them for 6 months, while I've known Paige my whole life. My sister was there when I had my first heartbreak. She's the one who introduced me to Trevor at her college graduation party. And Tessa has her own history with relationship betrayals. Her sister's husband left her for her best friend. Maybe she's just projecting her own fears onto my situation. But then again, Tessa has been around them more than I have lately. With all my therapy sessions and how exhausted I am most of the time, I don't actually know what goes on when I'm not in the room. And it's not like Trevor and Paige haven't done a lot for me. Trevor took a pay cut to get a more flexible job so he could drive me to appointments. Paige put her catering business on hold to help with my recovery. Those don't seem like the actions of people sneaking around behind my back. And yet, something feels different. Trevor doesn't hold my hand the way he used to. When he kisses me, it feels rushed, like he's just going through the motions. At first, I blamed it on stress. He's been doing so much for me, I didn't want to make him feel guilty for being exhausted. But now, I'm not so sure. The thought of confronting them makes my stomach turn. The truth is, I need them. Trevor handles our finances. Paige manages my medical appointments when Tessa isn't around. My parents live 3 hours away, and most of my close friends have moved out of state. Being blind has already made me feel cut off from the world. I can't afford to lose the only 2 people I rely on. And then there's the wedding. Our families are so intertwined at this point that calling it off would be a disaster. Trevor's mom already bought her dress. Paige is in charge of all the vendors. It's not as simple as just walking away. I needed advice from someone who could actually understand, so I turned to an online support forum for visually impaired people. I posted about everything, hoping someone else had been through something similar. Update, 2 weeks later. It's been 2 weeks since I last posted. I'd apologize for any typos, but I'm using a text-to-speech program, so I don't exactly have control over that. Luckily, my friend Shane from the support group recommended a proofreader who specializes in working with blind clients. Hopefully, my posts are easier to read now. Funny enough, this proofreader also happens to be friends with my eye doctor, which, surprisingly, ended up mattering later. These past 2 weeks have been hell. Every little thing between Trevor and Paige feels different now. Last Tuesday, I heard them laughing in the kitchen. The second I walked in, they went silent. Yesterday, I casually asked Trevor how his day at work was. He took 20 seconds to answer. And Paige? She immediately changed the subject. Before the accident, they never hesitated when talking to me. Now, it feels like they're constantly checking their words, making sure their stories match. And yet, when they think I'm asleep, their conversations sound completely normal. Tessa has been my eyes, literally and figuratively. She watches them whenever she can, but it's hard. She already does so much for me, driving me to therapy 3 times a week, helping me shower, guiding me through my exercises. The only time she's not with me are when I'm sleeping or when Trevor insists on taking over. Then, last week, she overheard something. Trevor and Paige were in the garage, having a whispered argument. When Tessa confronted them, they brushed it off, saying they were just discussing wedding centerpieces. But we finalized the centerpieces a month ago. And then came the biggest shock of all. At my last doctor's appointment, my eye doctor told me something I never expected to hear: my blindness might not be as permanent as we thought. There's a surgical procedure that could restore about 75% of my vision. But there's a catch. The surgery is extremely risky. If something goes wrong, I could suffer serious complications, ones that might affect my entire nervous system. The procedure would take multiple surgeries, spaced out over weeks. And even if everything went perfectly, the success rate is only 40%. The decision is entirely up to me. The second my doctor explained all of this, I shut it down. I've already spent months trapped in hospitals, listening to machines beep, being poked and prodded, taking medication after medication. There was a time when I couldn't even use the bathroom without help. My hair started falling out from stress. I developed panic attacks just from hearing medical equipment rolling down the hallway. Going through all of that again, just for a 40% chance? It seemed insane. But Tessa won't drop it. She keeps showing me testimonials from people who've had similar procedures, people whose lives were completely changed for the better. And now, for the first time, I'm wondering, if I took this chance, if I went through with the surgery, what would I see? And more importantly, what would I find? Tessa and I have been digging into every detail: the surgeon's credentials, potential complications, recovery time, even how much of it insurance would cover. The surgery itself costs nearly $200,000, but my accident insurance would take care of 80%. Trevor, however, has been oddly resistant. He keeps pushing me to save the insurance money for our future house. It's strange. Before, he was always the one encouraging me to try every possible treatment, to leave no option unexplored. Now, suddenly, he's changed his tune. My older brother, a pharmacist, looked into the medications I'd need post-surgery and told me they're actually milder than what I've already gone through. Physically, I could handle it. And emotionally? I keep picturing it, standing at the altar, Trevor turning to me, expecting to see the same blank, sightless expression I'd had for months, and instead, I'd be looking right at him. But Tessa isn't thinking about some grand wedding surprise. To her, this surgery is a chance to finally confirm what she already suspects about Trevor and Paige. If I went through with it, I'd be home about 3 weeks before the wedding, assuming there were no complications. The timing lined up almost too perfectly. But then the guilt hit. Was I really considering putting myself through a grueling medical procedure just to catch them? What if I endured all the pain and fear, only to find out I was wrong? My therapist told me I needed to figure out my real motivation. Was I doing this for me? Or was I doing it for revenge? I didn't have an answer. So, I turned to my support forum again, hoping someone else could tell me what to do. Update, 3 months later. I did it. After weeks of research, talking to former patients, and weighing every risk, I decided to go through with the surgery. The preparation was intense. I had to stop certain medications, undergo multiple pre-op screenings, and even gain weight because my doctor said it would make recovery easier. Before they could even begin the main procedure, I spent 5 days in preparatory treatments. And to keep everything a secret, I told everyone I was attending a specialized Braille training program in Boston. That's when things took a turn. Trevor and Paige immediately suggested that Tessa go back to her family while I was away. They claimed there was no point in paying her salary if I wasn't home. I argued that she could still help maintain the house, but they wouldn't let it go. They even called my parents to back them up, saying Tessa deserved a break. My mom agreed, saying it would give Trevor and Paige time to finalize wedding preparations. It felt too convenient, too calculated. But I couldn't say anything without exposing my real plans. Tessa refused to leave me completely alone. She rented an apartment near the hospital and split her time between visiting me and picking up nursing shifts to cover her expenses. The surgery itself went better than expected. The recovery? That was something else entirely. For 4 weeks, I endured pounding headaches, extreme light sensitivity, and waves of nausea. My body rejected the first few rounds of medication, forcing my doctors to keep adjusting the dosages. Through it all, Tessa stayed by my side. She read me updates from my medical charts, helped me practice eye exercises, and, in those quiet moments, told me about her past. I learned things I'd never known before. While I was going to piano lessons and summer camps, she was working in a diner at 14 to help pay her mother's medical bills. Her father left when she was young, and soon after, her mom was diagnosed with MS. She never got the chance to finish college. She had to work full-time as a caregiver just to survive. Meanwhile, my biggest concern in my early 20s was whether to take my dad's offer to work at his firm or pursue my own career. For the first time, I saw my life through a different lens. That month in the hospital changed me. Before the accident, my world revolved around wedding planning and molding Trevor into the kind of husband I wanted. I had a perfect vision of our future suburban house, 2 kids, weekend barbecues with friends. Now, I was lying in a hospital bed, terrified about what I might discover when I could finally see again. And for the first time, I started wondering, what if I didn't save my insurance money for a house with Trevor? What if I used it to start my own business? Travel? Go back to school? The accident forced me to confront a painful truth. I'd spent years chasing someone else's version of a perfect life. Update, 1 month later. It's been a month since my last update. And the surgery worked. I can see. 75% of my vision is back. The doctors say it's even better than expected. Colors are still a little blurry, and I need special glasses for light sensitivity, but compared to total darkness? It's incredible. But here's the thing I haven't told anyone. Back at home, I've been pretending I'm still blind. The glasses help sell the lie since I have to wear them anyway. Tessa moves back in, and everything feels like it did before except now, for the first time, I can see what's happening around me. And these past few weeks? They've been exhausting. At least 10 times, I've had to bite my tongue to keep from screaming the truth. Like when Trevor canceled our weekly date night, saying he had to work late only for me to watch him drive off with Paige instead. Or when they spent 3 hours in the basement, supposedly organizing wedding favors, while I was napping. But I stayed quiet. Because I needed to understand why. Why was Trevor still going through with the wedding? Was it guilt? Pity? Or did it have something to do with my accident insurance settlement, which was set to be paid out next month? Then, yesterday, I finally got the proof I needed. Though, God, I wish I hadn't. I was sitting in the living room while Trevor and Paige were in the kitchen, supposedly discussing the wedding menu. Through the reflection in the glass cabinet, I saw everything. Paige leaned against the counter while Trevor made coffee. Their voices were hushed, barely above a whisper. Then, she kissed his cheek. Instead of pulling away, he turned and kissed her on the lips. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped my phone. 4 years of love, trust, and commitment shattered in 10 seconds. The worst part? Watching them calmly fix their clothes, straighten their expressions, and walk back into the living room like nothing had happened. Like they hadn't just destroyed me. Paige smiled, casual as ever. Do you want coffee? I swallowed the bile in my throat and forced a smile. Sure. I had to get out of there before I lost it. So, I called Tessa, pretending I needed help running a last-minute wedding errand. Trevor and Paige exchanged a glance when I hung up. Curious. Suspicious. I made up a story about needing something from the bridal shop. And just like that, the game was on. Because now I knew. And they had no idea I could see everything. The way they looked at each other when I mentioned the wedding, like they were sharing some inside joke at my expense, made my stomach turn. I wanted to scream, to throw my glass across the room, to demand an answer right then and there. Instead, I smiled. I played along. I gushed about how excited I was to move forward with the wedding, how I couldn't wait to be Trevor's wife. And then he had the nerve to reach across the table, squeeze my hand, and say, "Me too, baby. I can't wait to marry you." That was the moment everything fell into place. Instead of looking nervous or guilty, he looked eager. Paige caught his eye, and they shared a quick, knowing glance before she smirked, like they were already celebrating something I wasn't in on. And that's when it hit me. Last month, my insurance agent told me about the final accident settlement and $800,000 payout scheduled for the end of the year, meant to cover lost wages and long-term medical expenses. If Trevor and I were legally married when that payment came through, he would have access to those funds. The timing of our wedding suddenly made perfect sense. It was set for exactly 8 weeks before that final payout. Before now, the settlement had been coming in small amounts, just enough to cover medical bills and rehab costs. But the real money was still to come. And Trevor had been unusually interested in my insurance paperwork lately, offering to make the calls, handling the documents, even suggesting I switch to his cousin's law firm, something that would have given him more control over the money. Then, just last week, I overheard him on the phone with a real estate agent. He was inquiring about a beachfront property, a home we definitely couldn't afford on his salary alone. Piece by piece, everything started falling into place. The way he had slowly pulled away from me, the lack of affection, the way he barely touched me anymore. When I asked about it, he said he was just being careful, afraid of hurting me. But I had seen him with Paige. Just yesterday, I watched him help her zip up her bridesmaid dress, his hands careful, lingering. I saw the way they moved around each other, comfortable, practiced. Meanwhile, he wouldn't even sit next to me on the couch anymore. I needed proof. So, I checked our joint account. Trevor had been taking Paige to expensive restaurants while telling me he was working late. That was the last confirmation I needed. They thought they were playing me. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The plan. I threw a pre-wedding party. A big one. I invited everyone. Trevor's family, my family, our college friends, my co-workers, even his boss, the one he hated. Paige, ever the devoted maid of honor, was thrilled to help plan it. She even convinced our parents to fly in early for the occasion. The venue was booked. The catering was handled. Everything was set. Except, this wasn't just a party. It was an execution. For the past week, Tessa and I had been gathering evidence. Photos. Bank statements. Screenshots of texts from Trevor's phone, ones Tessa had snagged when he left it charging unattended. They thought they were in control. They had no idea what was coming. Final update, 4 days later. The wedding is officially cancelled. Last night, in front of 60 guests, I ended my engagement in the most spectacular way possible. The party started off like any other. People were drinking champagne, enjoying the appetizers, congratulating us on the upcoming wedding. Trevor's mom kept showing off photos of the beach house she wanted us to buy near her place. Paige was playing the perfect maid of honor, making sure everyone's glasses stayed full, laughing at all the right moments. They thought they had one. They had no idea their world was about to implode. I waited until after dinner, until the drinks were flowing and the guests were relaxed. Then, I stood up, took off my glasses, and said, "I can see." The reaction was immediate. Gasps. Cheers. My mother burst into tears. Trevor's dad called it a miracle. Guests started clapping, excited, stunned, overwhelmed. And then there was Trevor and Paige. They looked like they had seen a ghost. Trevor's mouth opened and closed, his brain clearly short-circuiting. Paige stared down at her shoes, frozen, for the first time in weeks actually keeping a respectable distance from him. The room exploded with questions. When did this happen? How? Why didn't you tell us sooner? I told them everything. The surgery. The recovery. The 40% chance of success. The months of hiding it. Tessa, playing her role to perfection, chimed in with, "Why didn't you wait to reveal this at the wedding? That would have been the perfect moment." And that's when I turned to Trevor and Paige. Smiled. And said, "Because this is my wedding gift to you." Silence. Complete. Utter. Silence. Trevor's face drained of color. Paige's fingers trembled around the wineglass she was holding. The whispers started spreading through the crowd, guests turning to each other in confusion, in suspicion. Trevor tried to speak. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Paige shifted uncomfortably. Her eyes darted to Trevor, silently pleading for him to fix this, to come up with a lie that could explain it all away. But there was nothing to fix. I had just detonated the bomb, and all they could do was watch the wreckage unfold. Then, ever so casually, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small remote I had been holding all night. A click. The lights dimmed. The projector flickered on. And on the screen behind me, a slideshow began to play. Screenshots of their messages. Photos of them together. Bank statements from our joint account, showing every expensive dinner, every weekend trip, every secret purchase he had made while telling me he was working late. A text Paige had sent just last week. "I can't wait for this to be over." The room erupted. Gasps. Murmurs. Trevor's mother screamed. Paige's face crumpled, her perfect composure shattering. Trevor lunged toward me, voice frantic. "Baby, it's not what it looks like, I swear." I just laughed. For the first time in months, I laughed. Because I was finally free. Epilogue. Trevor moved out that night. His mother dragged him out of the venue by his ear, screaming at him the entire way. Paige ran after him, humiliated, too ashamed to look anyone in the eye. My family stayed. My friends stayed. We drank and laughed and celebrated like it was my wedding day. In a way, it was. It was the day I married myself, my new life, my new future. The day I walked away from the biggest mistake I ever almost made. And as I stood there, surrounded by people who actually loved me, I realized something. I never needed Trevor. And I sure as hell never needed Paige. They had been my blindness long before I ever lost my sight. But now, I could see everything. And it had never been clearer. The way they looked at each other when I mentioned the wedding, like they were in on some private joke at my expense, made me sick. But I didn't flinch. I smiled, nodded, and kept talking about how excited I was for our future. Trevor actually had the audacity to reach for my hand, squeezing it as he said, "Me too, baby. I can't wait to marry you." And just like that, the final piece fell into place. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't guilty. He wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. He was excited. Trevor and Paige exchanged a brief glance, one of those silent conversations that happen between two people who share a secret. He grinned, as if he could already see the finish line ahead. And that's when I knew. This wedding wasn't about love. It wasn't about commitment. It was about money. I remembered my conversation with my insurance agent last month. The final settlement and $800,000 payout was set to be processed at the end of the year. Money meant for my medical expenses, for my recovery, for my future. But if Trevor and I were married when that check cleared, he'd have access to all of it. And our wedding? It was scheduled exactly 8 weeks before that payout. Everything made sense now. The sudden distance. The lack of affection. The way he had stopped holding my hand, stopped kissing me like he used to, stopped touching me altogether. He said he was afraid of hurting me. But I had seen him with Paige. Just yesterday, I had watched him help her zip up her bridesmaid dress, his fingers lingering on her skin. I had watched him tuck her hair behind her ear, smiling like a man in love. And yet, he wouldn't even sit next to me on the couch anymore. I needed proof. So, I checked our joint bank account. Trevor had been taking Paige to expensive restaurants while telling me he was working late. That was it. I knew exactly what I had to do. The setup. I planned a pre-wedding party. A big one. I sent out invitations to everyone. Trevor's entire family. My family. Our college friends. My co-workers. Even his boss, the one he couldn't stand. Paige, of course, helped plan the whole thing. She was so excited. She even convinced our parents to fly in early, insisting that it would make the wedding feel more special. The venue was booked. The catering was ordered not through Paige's company, which raised a few eyebrows. And Tessa and I had spent the last week gathering evidence. Photos. Bank statements. Screenshots of texts from Trevor's phone, messages Tessa had grabbed when he left it charging, thinking nothing of it. They thought they were playing me. They had no idea the game was already over. Final update, the party. The wedding is officially cancelled. Last night, in front of 60 guests, I ended my engagement in spectacular fashion. The party started off like any other. Champagne flowed, appetizers were passed around, and people congratulated us on the upcoming wedding. Trevor's mom was practically glowing, showing off pictures of the beach house she wanted us to buy near her place. Paige played the role of perfect maid of honor, laughing at all the right moments, topping off everyone's drinks. They thought they had one. They had no idea what was coming. I waited until after dinner. Until the drinks were flowing, until people were relaxed, until no one suspected a thing. Then, I stood up, took off my glasses, and said, "I can see." The reaction was instant. Gasps. Cheers. My mother burst into tears. Trevor's dad called it a miracle. Guests clapped, voices overlapping with excitement and disbelief. And then there was Trevor and Paige. They went completely still. Trevor's face turned ghost white. Paige's grip tightened around her wineglass, her knuckles pale. It was the first time in weeks that they actually kept their distance from each other. The room erupted with questions. When did this happen? How? Why didn't you tell us sooner? I told them everything. The risky surgery. The 3-month recovery. The 40% chance of success. Tessa, playing her role flawlessly, gasped, "Why didn't you wait to reveal this at the wedding? That would have been the perfect moment." And that's when I turned to Trevor and Paige. Smiled. And said, "Because this is my wedding gift to you." Silence. Complete. Utter. Silence. Trevor looked like he had been punched in the gut. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again like a fish gasping for air. Paige stared down at her shoes, her entire body trembling. Then, I started listing details. The afternoon they spent in the pool house while I was at physical therapy. Their late-night meeting in his car last week. The kisses they thought no one had seen. With every detail, Paige paled further. Trevor's hands started shaking. Paige tried to deny it, stumbling over her words, but I didn't let her. Instead, I described the birthmark on her lower back. The one Trevor had been touching in the kitchen just 3 days ago. She went silent. Trevor, in one last desperate attempt, tried to flip this on me. He stood up, voice shaking, and declared that I was the dishonest one. That I had lied about the surgery. That my trust issues had destroyed our relationship. My own father had to hold me back. Then, I pulled out the folder Tessa and I had prepared. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. I simply let the facts speak for themselves. Inside were printouts of Trevor's recent credit card statements, hotel charges he couldn't explain, screenshots of his browsing history researching divorce lawyers. And the final dagger, a copy of the email he had sent to his cousin, asking how to access my insurance settlement after the wedding. $800,000. Enough for him and Paige to start their new life together. The room exploded. My mom started screaming at him in both English and Korean. Trevor's parents looked horrified. Especially when I mentioned how they had helped him check into marriage laws regarding disability benefits. Trevor's sister actually started crying, confessing that she had caught them together once but didn't know how to tell me. Paige, still desperately clinging to some shred of dignity, tried approaching me. She choked out something about how it just happened, and we never meant to hurt you. I didn't even look at her. I just said, "Save your fake tears for your next catering gig." 30 minutes of pure chaos followed. People yelling. Others trying to break up arguments. Guests taking sides. And I was done. I turned to Trevor, met his panicked gaze, and said, "You have 24 hours to get your things out of my house." He tried to argue. Tried to say his name was on the lease. I reminded him that my parents had been paying the rent for the past year. My dad had already called his lawyer. The paperwork was being handled. Paige tried following me as I walked out. She didn't get the chance. Tessa blocked her path. Last I heard, Paige was staying at a motel. Our parents won't let her come home. I've been in my room since last night, ignoring the flood of messages. My college friends want to take me on a trip to help me forget everything. Trevor's mom keeps calling to apologize. But I don't need an apology. I need space. The only person I'm talking to is Tessa. Because after everything, she's the only family I have left, and the only one I trust.